the previous tutorial, at the end I mentioned that we would like to render our application within this particular div instead of mounting it on the body tag. So to do that, we can actually use the DOM APIs, something which is similar to the JavaScript environment, wherein we can just do document.getElementById, pass in an ID, get reference to that div, and then render anything inside it. Either create element under it, or create a child node under it, or push an element inside it. We could do something similar here in Rust. So what we can actually do now is we could actually get access to the div using this API, which has a similar signature, that is document dot get element by ID. We can pass the ID as root. So it returns an option. So what do you mean by an option? It either returns none or it returns some. So we can actually get the result, and when it actually panics when we get none as a response, we can actually put in a message saying that root node not found. So this is basically the div that we have now got access to through REST. So how do you use this to mount this view on that particular div? So there is a method that Leptos provides called as mount. It accepts two parameters, that is the parent and then the view. So the parent here will now be app root. So now we are asking Leptos to mount this view on this particular div, but there is an error which says there is a mismatch in type. Basically, mount to application, or mount to, apologies for that, basically mount to accepts HTML element as an argument, but we are now passing an element, so there must be some way to cast it. So there is a crate called as websys, which we can use to cast from one type to another type. So what is websys? So websys is basically built on top of Wasm bindgen, where Wasm bindgen is basically a general purpose library or function that the Rust provides for the interaction between Wasm and then JavaScript. So I'm just going to use websys for now, or if you need more information on what is websys and what's the difference between websys and Wasm bindgen, you could just do this. We could just read about it here. It says Wasm bindgen is a tool that facilitates communication between Rust code and JavaScript. And websys is basically bindings for the standard web APIs. That's it. That is all there is to it. So all that we need is basically a library that provides us some tools to manipulate the web application. So that is why I'm using websys for now. Let's now try this. So what we can now do is, now that we've added this crate called as websys, we can easily do this. So websys Wasm bindgen jscast. We can now cast this element into an HTML element. So we have HTML element, there's a typo, HTML element, which will provide the result. We can just do expect unable to cast the element into HTML element. So I think this should do it. Now the error goes away. So you can now see that we are able to cast an element into HTML element, and application should work just fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this command. Oh, there seems to be a compilation error. So I fixed the compilation error, but there seems to be a warning. What is the warning? It says that unmount handle must be used. So what it is trying to convey to us is that when we do leptos mount to, when we actually run mount to function, we get a unmount handle. using which we can manually unmount this view. Since we want this application to be permanent mount, we can directly call forget on this. So it's a way for the developers to manage the mounting and unmounting of the view. So go back to my terminal. So we should see that the compilation is now successful. Let's go back to our localhost 8080, and then when we refresh, you should be able to see hello world now in your browser. That's it for this tutorial.